ICQ Podcast episode 390, Restarting Hamfests. Well, hello fellow amateur ham radio enthusiasts and welcome to this our 390th episode of the ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, supported this episode by our monthly and annual subscription donors. In this episode we join Martin M1MRB and also the other Martin, Mike 0 Sierra Golf Lima, along with Frank Kilo 4 Foxtrot Mike Hotel and Leslie Golf 0 Charlie India Bravo to discuss the latest amateur ham radio news. Myself, Colin M6PRY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode I am joined by Ian Shepherd, a member of the organising group of the UK Hamfest, to discuss Restarting Hamfests. Well, as always, it's your very kind generosity and donations that keep your ICQ podcast working away and broadcasting and, as they've been deliverable for you. And we do this by what's called the value for value model. So what we ask you to do is if you found any value from your show that you've had today or recently, we ask you to turn it into a financial figure and send it our way by visiting icqpodcast.com/donate. And as I say, this episode, we'd like to thank the monthly and subscription donors who continue to support us and help us along our way. Right, well now we're going to join the two Martins, Frank and Leslie, as they discuss and generate thoughts about the latest amateur ham radio news, including Counterfeit Icom products and N-Class coming to Germany. As always, hope you enjoy.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to episode 390 of the ICQ podcast, and tonight's round table for that episode. Tonight I have Mr. Martin Rothwell, M0SGL. Hi Martin.
Good evening, everybody.
Yeah, he's with us too. I also have Mr. Frank Howell, K4FMH. Hi, Frank.
Martin, how many toes and do you have on both feet? I mean, what's the total number?
Well, I ain't from Manchester, but that's another story. I've got 10. Why?
And you know why? That's how many more we got to go to reach 400.
That is.
So hang on, we've got 10-4 left.
Behave.
Sorry, good buddy.
Yeah, good to be here.
Yeah, good to have you, Frank. And our favourite person that they all impersonate you, Leslie, and you will have to come to an event with us one day, is our Leslie, G0CIB. Hi, Leslie.
Good evening, Martin. When you said our favourite person, I was looking behind me and there was nobody there.
Well,
very good evening, always. Good to be back on again.
Yeah,
sorry. Have they wandered off, Leslie?
oh, you cruel person! You behave yourself.
Yeah.
Oh,
you can't say we don't have fun, and it's my job to get him in trouble. And Chris isn't here to control him tonight. So.
Oh yeah. He does frown at me when I go off the rails a bit, but
yeah. And can we just apologise for Martin's very dodgy joke there, just to be clear?
yeah. Anyway,
life's too short to be miserable, you know.
Are we not miserable? We have fun, mate. That's the most important thing. If it ain't fun, you don't do it, which is the good one. Right. Not a lot of news about, but I'm sure we'll bring you some entertainment along the way. Reaching youth through amateur radio in the classroom. The ARRL, once again, pushing this education and learning via Steve Goodgame, K5ATA. Frank, your side of the pond, you know, it does seem to me that the ARRL does seem to push things a bit more. What's your thoughts?
I'm very positive about this, and let me articulate why. In the past, with their Teachers Institute, where they would get people to nominate teachers and get them to come in and to Newington, Connecticut, and they would spend time with them. And we've covered that here on the podcast. That's going what we might call onesies and twosies. You're going to individual teachers and trying to get them included in amateur radio. So they'll bring it back to their school. Well, you know, as we all know, when we build our own Radio Shack, there are a lot of pieces and parts that go into just getting an operational station. So if you think for a moment, a teacher is only one part of it. That teacher, be it he or she's got to secure a place to put this thing powered by electricity, this thing that has a cable that runs outside with an aerial. All that involves the physical plant, and you've got safety issues. You got a lot of reasons to have a school principal or head say no. And they won't get fired if they say no. There might be something happen if they say yes. Now, I've interviewed someone who's been a school superintendent, beginning as a teacher, who had worked in our State Department of Education here in Mississippi, which is where Steve Goodgame, K5ATA, came from before he went to Newington. He was a middle school teacher in North Mississippi. And I interviewed this person, and he had just recently retired from the University of Mississippi, where he trained school administrators. So it's probably as good a person as I could find to ask him, what's the likelihood if you approach 10 teachers that you would get 3 of them to say, yes, I want to know more about ham radio and I'm willing to host one in a school? And he honestly said no more than 3 out of 10. And that's when you give your best presentation. Why? Because it isn't just about the teacher. Now, with that prologue, here's why I really like what ARL is doing here. Steve Goodgame took his family, which I think is his wife and daughter, or maybe just his daughter. She's been an intern there at the ARL, at least over the summer. And we talked about the ham lab when they're going to figure out ways to show us how to do our ham shacks better. That's the person in that story. So they go to Georgia and attend a statewide educational technology conference. I've been to many of these things back in the day as a college professor, because universities would send people to these things to talk about technology and what's going on. Here's what's really good about this. They're not going to the individual teachers per se. They're going to the organizational middle management of school. And you've got to get their buy-in to be able to effectively get schools to adopt this technology. Here's another problem with just going for individual teachers. You get a teacher who is an eager beaver. Yes, I love this. I'm going to really excite my students with technology. I'm going to get them into amateur radio. I am gung-ho. You know what happens to those teachers? They tend to have a lot of other characteristics that get them promoted. They move up the chain and make more money, and they're no longer there. So a local club that's going through the 1s and 2s approaches of identifying a teacher and supporting them, they leave. And so you've got to do it over again. So I'll end with that. I think that what they're doing is hitting the organizational groups involved with schools. And I think that is a much more effective strategy to try to promote amateur radio and its place in schools.
Yeah, certainly sounds it, Frank. And, you know, I suppose in many ways we're all Elmers. I like to see people, whatever they do, trying to put things forward. Leslie, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, I was listening to Frank's reply. Very, very interesting indeed. And I think he hit a lot of nails on the head. It's not just... Normally, we're looking sort of for a project, even within companies, a project champion, somebody to move that thing forward. And unfortunately, Frank is right that when they move on, the project or whatever they're trying to do then falls. I think he's right. You need to hit the organisations. Maybe that's the wrong word, but really hammer it and say, and some people will say yes. And then take it from there. We've got to go out and get people interested, and that's the only way. That's the only way that this hobby will continue. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, well, the more we promote it, the better, isn't it? I'll come on to what I've been up to in a similar vein to this. Martin, what do you think on this one?
Do you know what? I have got if I had a hat, I'd take it off. I'd take my headphones off to the ARRL, but it would make a horrible screeching noise, so I'm not going to do that. The fact that they're pushing this and they're trying to incorporate amateur radio into the curriculum, I think is absolutely fantastic. I accept that not everybody will be interested in this. Not every student will be interested in this. I get it. But, if I'd have had this when I was at school, I'd have loved this. Sign me up. And thinking back, to the people that I went to school with, probably half the people in my class would have loved something like this. I remember at the time getting a CB and, people were like really, really interested. What's that you've got? They'd love to know more. And that was just like a little handheld CB. And imagine what you could do with something that can talk around the world very easily or comparatively easily. So, good. Hats off to the ARRL. I would ask, are people like the RSGB doing this? Are other national bodies doing this? If, I don't know. I have to be honest. I don't know. I've not researched that. If they're not, and I'm not just picking on the RSGB, but other national bodies around the world as well, they would very much do well to take notes from the ARRL. Let's put it this way. We're all in it for the same game. It's not like you're copying ideas. And even if you do class it as copying an idea, we're all trying to achieve the same goal. Let's work together. Just because you're a different organisation doesn't mean we can't, take the same ideas. Oh, that's a great idea. Let's push that out over here, because I guarantee if you do it for them, maybe they'll take some of your ideas and push them forward. So, and it's good to hear the comment. The level of interest among teachers was incredible.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing that they're doing, in fairness, and like all of you said. I think also we are all ambassadors for our hobby. We're all Elmers to people who don't know anything about their hobby. I started work a couple of months ago, and I'm working not in the amateur market, but I am working in radio. And got a young girl started about 4 or 5 weeks ago. And she was looking absolutely lost on one thing or another, because when the conversation's going, at least 50% of the staff are amateurs, so it comes up every day, a chat on something to do with amateur radio. And I took in a foundation book, and I said to her, you can borrow that one off me. It's one of my teaching books. You can borrow that one off me. I'm not pushing you to get a license, but if it gives you a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of understanding, as you go forward, you won't be totally blind when we're talking about things. And she, I'll read it. So she's gone off to read the foundation book, the license. I've said to her, I'm not going to push you to get your license. But if you want to ask questions, if there's anything you don't understand, ask questions. Now, hopefully, that might turn into something, might not. But knowledge for her is going to be good news, whatever she does. And I did that. And the CEO said to me, yeah, I really ought to do that. And she's a lady. She said, I really ought to understand more about this. I said, well, I've got another foundation book. Read that. Ask me the questions. So I've given the CEO and a young girl that started as a junior. So I think it's down to all of us. The ARRL, great, 100%. But all of us can do, show our enthusiasm and help people try and understand. And don't tell them they have to get a license. Let them decide they get a license if they want a license. But it's an awareness of what we do, I think, is the important thing. I don't know if you guys agree or not.
Well, I do, Martin, very much so. And it's not just this hobby as well. It is technology. People using technology, should we say, the older generation, that they want to learn how to do things, and our iPads and all types of things. So it's just a case of passing the knowledge on, and it becomes almost infectious. And once they're hooked on their device, whatever it is, could be an amateur radio, could be their iPad or whatever, just watch them go. And they, and you're looking and they're doing things you didn't know how to do. That's the way it works sometimes. No, the one thing I would say was that it was quite some time ago, the RSGB used to visit schools. Unfortunately, they had a vehicle and they were charged on the emission zones. And unfortunately, the cost of the emission zones actually made that not feasible at all financially. So I'm not sure what happened after that. But I did know they put an awful lot of effort into it, but had to stop it because of the fees on the local fees on emissions on the vehicle. So that had to stop, unfortunately.
Let me just add this in, and if you're a ham who has not been in schools, you're not a teacher, you don't work at one, or you don't have kids and you visit, there are two things. The schedules of schools have changed over the years, and they count minutes of contact for accreditation. And so when you want to come in, even what Leslie was just talking about, coming to do a school visit, if you can pigeonhole that in as counting as this is a contact in STEM or whatever the administrator says, then you might get approval. Otherwise, you're taking away from their contact minutes. Now, during COVID, we all saw what happened when in-person schools kind of shut down, and now there's all the ballyhoo and research about what they lost and all that. So we're ever more mindful about those policies now. And teachers and students' schedules, they don't have a minute to spare. Good friend of mine who is a ham has grandkids, and they happen to go to a private school. His wife is a department head of English in probably one of the best private schools in the Jackson area. I listen to his grandkids' schedules. I don't see how these kids do it. They have zero free time for play. And if you want to get something new into their clock, man, you've got to really convince their parents. So my only point is that for the rank and file teacher, you've really got to reach them and see how it can benefit them and their ability as a teacher.
Absolutely.
Because they have enough to do. I'll share a quick story. At Texas A&M University, there was a football coach named Jackie Sherrill. He was the first football coach in America to make $1 million. And he sent out a note to all the faculty and said, look, I want to support academics. So I've got a form here with all the football players on it, and I want you to copy it, and I want you to record if each of the football players are in your class and send it over to the football office, because I'm going to look at it. So what he didn't realize is the professors in classes had another form to fill out and to take care of was like, a hole in the head. And so one of my colleagues there sent him a response back and says, I'll be one faculty member who will gladly do it. Now, here's a list of our majors, and I want you to see if they're at the football game on Saturday. And if you'll do that, then I'll do this. So obviously that wasn't going to happen with 80,000 students in the stands. The point is, we may not be aware of just how busy and stuffed both teachers and students' schedules are. So it's a hard sell. It's one we have to make, though.
Indeed.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, but yeah, that's it's good that we're all trying and all singing from the same hymn sheet on this one. Right, moving to our next news story. This came out of Icom UK, and it said important information: beware of counterfeit Icom products. Now, they're not going to first manufacturer to warn us of counterfeit products. They won't be the last, because as adults, we always want something on the cheap. And a lot of this stuff's manufactured out in the Far East, and I'm sure they make a lot more than they're asked to. So if you've got a run, if your factory's set up to make a run of 5,000, making 8,000 and selling the rejects off as the genuine items, did I say that out loud, is possibly an option for them. Leslie, what's your thoughts?
Well, I use Icom equipment, and I must admit it tends to be in the, you pay that amount of money for Icom, and it's good equipment, very good equipment, and it lasts a long time. I've still got my 2Es and 4Es. I've still got my Icom 725, and I think they're great. However, what I do have is a case of about a dozen BF888s. And when I'm on field days and people need a little handheld to mess about with, and they cost about the same as a sandwich, and if they get damaged, I don't really care. But I know what I'm buying. The both things are for that use, and the Icoms are for my own personal use. And if somebody is going to buy quality equipment at knockdown price, they're going to be disappointed. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah. Well, the problem we've got in life is if something's $50 and I'm offering it for $25, most people will buy it off me for $25 because they're like, God, I've saved $25. It's not a matter of it's a counterfeit. Frank, you were talking about this as well, weren't you? What do you think?
It's a little surprising. I mean, for Icom, we have seen our friends at SDR Play, for example, with their SDR radios have on both eBay and Amazon have nefarious sellers, to put it in some terms, advertise them as SDR Play radios, and they're simply not. I've tried to work with John Hudson there on eBay and did a blog post on here's how you report fake stuff on eBay. It's just about 3 clicks of a mouse and you can get it done. And I've allocated at times a half hour per week, and all I would do is go search SDR Play and report the bad ones. It's a little surprising at Icom, and I've looked at least what Icom says. They say all Icom radios are manufactured only in Japan. I'll take the word for it. They certainly know where they're manufactured, but we've just seen so many times, whether it's the infamous Rolex watches and other things like that, people take advantage of consumers who have greed. We all have greed. We always want to pay less. But I'm like Leslie. There are times I've criticized Icom on one thing or another, and somebody said, well, you just don't like Icom. And I go, well, why do I have more Icom radios than I have any other single brand then? It's not that I don't like Icom. We can critique anything. So I'm really, my money follows my mouth in some ways because I have more Icom radios than any other single brand. But I do have other brands. So I'm a little surprised by this, but I shouldn't be. And I think we just all need to be wary. They say if it's got made in China on it, but it says it's Icom, it's a fake. And that may just be what people should look at. Because even if they get a good deal, Martin, they won't get it serviced by Icom.
Not a chance.
There you go. And that's one of the problems that we had with Xiegu. Now, Radioddity is doing a good job, and Connect Systems in the state of Washington, who resells Xiegu, they do as good a job as they can. MFJ was contacted by Xiegu, and they were a distributor in the U.S. And at one point for the X5105, they were the sole distributor. Well, here's the problem. Xiegu wouldn't give MFJ the technical documents so that MFJ could do on-site repairs. So only thing MFJ could do, and I bought an X5105 from them, if it failed, they would just have to send it back. And if it was in warranty, give me another one. The problem is they generally didn't have them in stock. So the service part of that, it may be like buying an automobile. There are a lot of people who can make an automobile, but an automobile is going to have to be serviced. And unless you're willing to do it in compensation for that lower price, then you just need to be aware and getting support. And it amazes me when I see people who go for the rock bottom dollar, and whether it's a Baofeng, Leslie, and I've given a case of Baofengs to the Ham Radio Club in my home county in Georgia for new licensees, and you can buy them by the case if you want to. But if you expect to get product support and tech support, pretty spotty. You can get product support and tech support from Icom. A lot of people out there know a lot about Icoms, and they're legitimate service bureaus. So that's the thing that's probably worth thinking about with the counterfeit Icoms.
Yeah, well, as I say, counterfeiting is a big thing. It's not only electronics. Martin, you're very quiet on this. What's your thoughts?
I'm sorry, I was just quiet because I was just buying a brand new Icom 7800 off of eBay from a guy called Dodgy Dave. 100 quid, good value. Says it's not counterfeit, so it must be true. So that's just why I was being really quiet. Do you know, I had something reported as fake. Ironically, by, I think it was, supposedly in reality it was an unlicensed product more than fake, and they didn't take kindly to it because it was like a major film studio. But it was an unwanted gift someone had given me, and I just stuck it on eBay. But ironically, eBay let the listing run and someone buy it before they took it down. So, yeah, there we go. Yeah, and I think a lot of manufacturers experience it's not just Icom. We had a microphone company that came in recently that were talking about fakes and being a victim of them themselves. And I've actually, you can go on eBay and you can quite, other auction sites are available, and you can quite easily find fakes. It's like, okay, this is like £200 here, it's £20 here. Well, there's clearly something wrong with that. But, occasionally you get something. There's one company, we tried something on, well, actually the fake one was better than the original, which was, I couldn't quite work that one out. But I've got to say, fair on Icom to bring this to people's attention and for offering a service to confirm whether or not the product you have is real or fake. They can obviously help you out there. I don't know if this is new because there seems to be quite a lot of memes going around on social media about Icom at the moment. And I think it's quite unfair. People are sort of talking about kit getting really hot. I've got lots of Icom kit. Yes, it gets warm, but it's no warmer than my Yaesu gear or my Anytone or my Motorola for that matter. So I wonder if, the people that are making these memes or wherever they came out of have perhaps experienced a counterfeit product or something that is not genuine. But again, you're right what you're saying about, the possibility of, if someone's making a product and, if there are some not good ones made. I don't know if Icom make these themselves in-house or whether they are put out to a third party to manufacture on their behalf. I don't know. Icom won't tell us that, I'm sure. But, I'm sure it does happen that, we have spare parts. So of course we can build things. There is a company that make two-stroke garden tools. I won't mention their name. And they are a very, very good company that make these two-stroke garden tools. And a lot of the parts, you can go online, you can buy all the parts from the same manufacturer that manufactures them on behalf of this one company and get the identical product just without the brand name on the side, and you just put it together yourself. So I'm sure it does happen, but if you think you've got a dodgy product or something isn't working, maybe give Icom a ring. The details are in the show notes, and say, hello, have I got a genuine product or have I been ripped off? But yeah, Icom makes some great gear, but nothing against it.
Martin, you sparked a thought. Routinely, several manufacturers have what they call B stock, and there are legitimate places here in the U.S. MTC Radio in Paris, Texas, is one, and they actually say, "Look, I want to buy your B stock." Now, I don't know what it takes to constitute a B stock. Maybe it's a return. Maybe it's a blemish on the cabinet. Who knows? You'd have to check that out. But I've seen that for Kenwood. I think I've seen it for Yaesu. I may have seen it for Icom. I'm not sure. But that's a legitimate thing where you label it as this isn't 100% our best product.
Yeah, but if you're buying that, you know what it is you're buying. If you
Absolutely.
Go in and you go, I'm going in to buy a B stock radio, whether it's shop soiled, whether it's a return or whatever,
Absolutely.
you know you're buying this, and it might not be. Generally they'll come with some kind of warranty,
and
it
they
might only be 3 months.
Yeah, they do, and so that's different from what we're talking about fundamentally.
Yeah. But of course, if someone is buying something that is, it's got an Icom logo on it, and you get it home and you open it up and there's a Baofeng inside it, or the equivalent of a Baofeng, that's clearly counterfeit, isn't it? Or if we've copied the circuit board. Which does happen, it's unfortunate.
Well, listen, Martin, I have a Dell Precision T1700 workstation. I have 2 of them in my ham shack, one to run my SDRs, one to do everything else. And I bought it both on eBay used. I tend to do that like a lot of people. I come to find out when I was doing the driver updates and Dell was querying my device to find out what it was. It's an Optiplex. And I wound up taking the lid off of it and looking at it. And whoever sold it to me on eBay put an Optiplex motherboard, a less expensive PC, into a more expensive Precision workstation and sold it. And I didn't know any difference. I mean, I had no reason to, it fit in the whole deal, but I found out by accident. So.
Do you know what? I genuinely, and I'm getting way off topic here. I genuinely had a sticker. Do you remember the stickers that used to say like Intel inside, and you had the little swoosh, the logo? Right. I think when you say Intel, you're supposed to play that ding jingle. But I had one of those on my old computer that said "idiot outside." And Frank, I like you. You're a genuine guy. But do you need one of those stickers? Shall I pop one in the post to you?
I think I might need a couple, Mark.
Yeah, well, as I say, it's interesting, but the B grade stock isn't a new thing, guys. I mean, I remember back in the 1970s when I was a TV repairman. One of the companies I worked for, and predominantly the sets were sold sold into the rental market. They rented them out rather than selling them to customers, although I'm pretty sure they probably sold some. But they used to buy Philips colour televisions, but not from Philips. They used to buy them from the Philips Repair Centre. So what would happen is if they went out and they got dropped, or they'd go back and have a new case, or if the tube wasn't any good, they'd put a new tube in. So they were effectively brand new. They were just like refurbished. They hadn't got years of life on. But if there was a fault or a return, they went back to the return centre. And the company I worked for used to buy them off the return centre. And, when you're putting them out on the rental market, well, it's not it doesn't have to be a brand new telly because you're renting it. So, I suppose B grade stock, you can take a chance on it. As long as it's advertised as that, I don't see a problem. Right. Moving to the next one. And Frank, on this one, the WIA have published some stuff. They did a survey back in March 2021. And come up with 3 options, and the option is keep it the same. You don't feel very warm about this one, from what I gather, Frank.
Well, with my ID 10T sticker that Martin is going to send me here on my forehead, let me sally forth into this story. The Wireless Institute of Australia is the RSGB ARL, Radio Amateurs of Canada, if you will, for Australia. One of them. There are 2 there, which is a little unusual. So their authorizing authority, ACMA, is doing something that is commonly done, is they ask for advice and they solicit input. So what does then the WIA do? Well, they want to collect some information on this particular thing from their constituency. So I looked on their website. It's a nice website, but it does not search very easily, and I couldn't find anything about the survey. I wanted, of course, to look at the technical report for it. But nonetheless, they have 3 options. Do you keep the existing licensing arrangements? Do you simplify it by amending the license? Do you transition the license arrangements to something else, non-assigned amateur stations and those sorts of things? It can get complicated for what we might call the uninformed respondent. And by that, let me just give you a brief example. We just had the launch of the Artemis rocket to the moon. So if you did a quick telephone survey and I get Leslie, and I say, Leslie, on a rating from 1 to 10, how good do you feel about the launch of the Artemis? Well, Leslie may or may not have been keeping up with that. And he may go, Artemis, that's my cousin. I don't like him at all.
No, I think it's awesome.
But my point is, you may take it to be something completely different than what the surveyor is trying to measure. But the point I'm getting at is when you get a complicated topic and the respondents that you're trying to survey may not have a lot of information about it, then of course the modal response is going to be, don't change a thing. And that may have been what they got, but I'm saying that without benefit of their actual survey report, because I couldn't find it, on their website. So I'm not surprised at the results, Martin, and I don't know the nuances, of changing classes. Amateur radio operators in general would probably be somewhat fearful today about a government authorizing agency indicating that changes may be afoot. We all tend to want to think the most negative and the most threatening, because why? There are people who want more bandwidth. And in fact, they may want some of ours. So I'll leave it to the other presenters to comment on that. But that was my first reaction. I'm all for documenting your survey data. That 84% means nothing to me if you don't tell me how you got it. And I tend to, be a little more hard nosed on that. And it doesn't have to be the best survey in the world, but as long as you disclose how you obtained it, that's certainly what you need to do. So they would like, the ACMA wants amateur radio there to be self-regulating. That is what the FCC wants in the U.S. I don't know about Ofcom. I'm not sure about the authorizing group in Canada. There's a reason for that. We don't generate a lot of money. We're borderline nuisance. It's something by law they have to do. So take care of yourself. And that's really the administrative spirit of that being self-regulated. So anyway, I'll end with that.
Yeah, I hear where you're coming from. But I suppose, Frank, it depends on how you load the questions and answers. I mean, here there were 3 options. If I said option D was that you get twice as much power and your license fee is going to be half the price, you know which option D would have won it outright.
Absolutely. And when we talk about what we've been doing, I'll tell just a little bit about the work that I've just completed for Radio Amateurs of Canada, because they've just completed a survey, and I wrote and analyzed the data and completed the technical report for the executive group and the board in Canada to look at call sign policies. So I hear what you're and could not agree with you more, Martin. You can set up a question. And it's the old thing about when did you quit beating your spouse? That presupposes a certain judgment that you have been doing that to begin with. So I hear what you're saying.
Yeah. Leslie, you found this document that a bit difficult to get your head around from what you were saying.
Okay. There's an exposure draft document, part 1 and 2, from the Wireless Institute of Australia, response to the Australian Communications and Media Authority, ACMA, consultation 31/2022. And this document's freely available on the website. It's 62 pages. I read through it and I could not. I thought, what are the ACMA driving at here? What do they want? And I read it again and I couldn't see it. And then I read it again and I'm thinking, is something wrong with my understanding? And I came across a couple of things. It says on page 14, and it's a little recommendation, and the penny dropped at this point. And it says that the ACMA needs to reconsider the language and writing style used in this document and work to improve its readability. You can say that again, guys. It needs to be framed in a way that enhances understanding by the target technical, rather than the legal audience. Well, I took a qualification in legal many years ago, and I still had difficulty getting to the crux of it. And it also said that failure to do so will likely result in significant levels of unintended non-compliance, particularly amongst communities where English is the second language. Now, the other point I've found, let me just go to page 7, section 2.2, amateur services operators are university technically qualified chapter. And it says, the WIA finds that from time to time, some of the proposals by ACMA to manage the amateur radio service have been drawn directly from current commercial practices that always do not align with the fundamental nature of amateur service. And then the penny dropped. I thought, and there's quite a few headings, quite a few major issues, and I think Frank scratched the surface on some of them, that there's there's about 5 major issues that would take a considerable amount of time to solve on their own, but these issues do overlap. About licensing, about call signs, about equipment, for example. We don't use type approved equipment, and I don't think that's understood. EMC, RF safety, increased power levels. Need I go on? If you really want to look at this document, like I said, it needs to be very, very carefully read. And I think they've got a lot of work on their hands. I've seen things like this before, and what else can I say, Martin? I hope I've given a good overview.
Yeah, I think I favour the KISS principle. I'm afraid, keep it simple, stupid. Make it easy to read. Make people understand it. They don't have to have the who's and where's and whom's and this person shall be known as. Get over with it. I'm sorry, but that's just me. Right, moving to our last news story. I'm going to pass this to you, Martin, first. Germany proposes a new N-class license for entry level. Got to be a good thing, I would thought, Martin. What do you think?
Well, it's got to be. I mean, I was very confused. I mean, do you know what? I guess it's the fact that we've been spoilt having 3 levels of licensing for so long here now. The foundation being relatively easy to get if you sort of turn up, do the homework and spell your name right. Germany's proposing a new N-class entry-level license could be in place as early as January the 1st, 2023. Changing regulations would give N-class operators call signs with the prefix DN, and the current DN call signs, which are only being used for training purposes under the supervision of a license hand, will be cancelled on December the 31st. So I'm guessing that's like the equivalent of like a club call sign that's being removed. But yeah, anything that can bring or give people an easier way into the hobby. I mean, I was put off when I started. I mean, okay, it was harder to get the amateur radio license when I initially wanted to get into it because there were less places doing it. It wasn't as easy to search online to find a place to go and do your exam and things like that. And, it was a lot harder because you had to do things like Morse and use all sorts of different papers. And then they came along with the 3-tier system, and in the UK, that works really, really well. If Germany are talking about bringing this in, I'm surprised it's taken them this long, but fantastic. Let's get people another way of getting on the air. It's can only be a good thing.
I totally agree with you. There's, 3-tier license system in the UK. I do believe has worked very, very well for a lot of people. It's brought people into the hobby.
Absolutely. I mean, there are things. Look at the 3-tier licensing system. The step from foundation to intermediate is not that big. The step from intermediate to advanced is massive. I would like to see that, certainly in our system, evened out. I'd like to see the intermediate sort of get not harder, but just a little bit closer to it. But
I think they've made efforts to try to do that.
Have they? Okay, so
I believe that to be so. Yes.
It's probably 10 or 12 years since I did my intermediate. So more than that, I can't remember now.
Yeah, they've increased what you need to learn on foundation, and they've moved some of the full license questions down into intermediate, or things down into intermediate.
So they've leveled it out a lot more. I'll be honest with you.
Leveled it.
I've not looked at that syllabus since I studied it. I can't remember. I got licensed in 2008 was my foundation. 2009 was my intermediate. So yeah, 2009 I did the intermediate, and 2011 I did the full.
Yeah. Well, as I say, it's a good one. Leslie, what's your thoughts on this one?
The system we've got, it can always be, shall we say, modified, but it works. we get people into the hobby. Once they've got the little fish has been hooked, and then they go on. Some go on to the next license up. Some obviously decide that hobby is not for them, and that's absolutely fine, or they want to go on to other things. But yeah, a certain percentage will go up to the intermediate, and again, a certain percentage will go up to the advanced. Great. Our system works. Not just our system, but other countries have got a similar system. And if they're going to bring this along, great.
Yeah, it certainly is, because we try and be inclusive and not exclusive.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. I mean, I think when we did ours, Leslie, you were exclusive, because if you hadn't done a hell of a lot of work and didn't have some form of electrical background, you were really going to be a massive fight uphill. Whereas now, let's bring people in. Let's give them the enjoyment of our hobby, but obviously limit them from a technical point of view as need be. But that's why you got the 3 license tier in the States, isn't it, Frank?
I think so. What we have discussed, and we've thrashed about with license changes in different countries before, and I think we've tried to all be fairly objective about it. But what it presupposes is what is sort of a theory, if you will, for the career of a ham. And by that, how do we see hams progressing in the hobby? And part of that progression is correlated, with what they get access to. And, I'm positive about this. I think it can't hurt and can only help, I think. People don't get licensed as young people here in the States much anymore. Yes, there are some. Send all the mail to Martin Rothwell, Big Cheese Radio, United Kingdom, general delivery. So we have some young people who get licensed. But when you start looking at the survey data that we have about the ages of licensees who are at least active enough to be involved in surveys, there are not that many young people. So you're talking about adults getting licensed. When you have a pressure situation like we used to have in the old novice class here in the States, I was never a novice. I didn't get licensed till 2010 after even code was removed. But I was around amateur radio, read QST, and was involved in commercial broadcasting earlier. So I knew a fair amount about amateur radio. The pressure today of getting a novice ticket, and you've got 12 months to move up, you'd have a lot of young people today just say, the heck with this. I got a lot of other things that are a lot more fun for me to do. So that regulation wouldn't fit anything like the career of a ham in the U.S. Would fit. That shoe won't fit. So those are some of my thoughts about it. And we thrash about with how this should work, and it's related to the access to power and frequencies and things like that. But I think this will help amateur radio in Germany. I certainly do.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to be honest about this, and it's lucky that Sutton and Cheam do have this ethos, the Sutton and Cheam Amateur Radio Society. We don't care what level of licensee you are, or even if you're a shortwave listener. If you're interested in radio, you're welcome. And, the foundation license holders should hold as much credibility and feel comfortable within a group. We don't have a hierarchy on a licensing system. And there's a very good reason for that. We all enjoy radio. And secondly, there are quite a few foundation license holders that I know that have only bothered to do the foundation because, I just wanted to play with antennas. I'm not interested in contests. I'm not interested in this, not interested in that. I wanted to play with antennas and do some experimenting, but I just needed to be able to put a few watts out to test antennas.
Martin, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, well, it is, because the hobby's so big, we shouldn't necessarily knock them. I mean, I've met some people that are very, very knowledgeable, and but they maybe only got a foundation license holder because that's all they wanted to do within the hobby for their own experimental purposes. And if they're enjoying themselves, I don't see any problem with that.
Martin, I've dropped in on the Sutton and Cheam Club, and I plan to do tomorrow. Now that will, when this drops as a podcast, that will have been in the past, and so I'm only aware by Zoom. And good on you, because we have what I like to call hardening of the categories here, at least my familiarity. We have too many clubs, especially, who have these categories, and if you don't fit in them, then you don't fit in with them. We have a club here in the Jackson area that decades ago, if you were a no-code tech licensee, you were not welcome there. And someone who later became the most famous ham in the whole state of Mississippi had been someone who was shown the door, if you will. And he gave a talk to them. He happened to be on a very famous video podcast, and I'm coding this on purpose so I don't name names. And they would have been delighted to have him as a member then. But you get the point, is that so many clubs have these categories, and if you don't fit in them, then you are not welcome. And who does that help? It doesn't help the hobby. It does not help the hobby. So good on you at Sutton and Cheam for having that approach.
Do you know something else we don't have at Sutton and Cheam? And that's a blame culture, and that is 100% Martin's fault.
Yeah, blame culture. Blame Martin.
Yeah, and it's your fault.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, no, we are pretty across the board, and if any clubs are thinking about how to improve your functionality of your club, don't have license hierarchical system, and don't have a blame culture. You know, you work through together, and everybody helps everybody, and everybody does what's needed. So that's a good one. Right, that brings us to the end of our news stories. Only 4 today, but we've run a fair time, so I'm sure those of you walking your dogs around parks and things like that early hours of the morning will have had something to listen to. Now let's find out what the guys have been up to since the last time we spoke. I'm going to go with Leslie first on this one. Do you want to tell us what you've been up to?
I just knew you were going to come over to me, Martin. Right. I've just written a few things down. First of all, I have to say well done to Sutton Cheam Club, because I had the Icom antennas talk that I attended, and that was great. I really loved the way the guy was making his bits and pieces, and he had an injection molding machine, and how he made all the jigs. I thought that was a great talk. What else have I been doing? Been working on Club Shack, trying to sort it out. Unfortunately, we've had a lot of accumulated stuff over the years, and I just got a little bit fed up. I thought, look, guys, this has got to be sorted. So I'm gradually going through all the stuff, and I found an old balance sheet that goes back to 1962, which had a few chuckles. Doing all our AGM stuff, because I look after the money, basically. And I got myself a new Howell microphone, and I'm trying to learn about audio and all that side of things, and listening to a YouTube by a certain Irishman. Good evening, George, if you're listening. And I have to say, because I know she's listening tonight, thank you, Jackie, for the custard tarts. They were divine. Over to you, Martin.
So where's our custard tarts then, Leslie?
They're in the bottom of his tea glass.
They probably are. Leslie, you don't dunk custard tarts now, do you?
Well, she said, would I like some? I went, yes.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say no.
No, true. All right. Well, say, I'm glad you enjoyed. Frank, I'm going to leave you to last, because I know you've got some interesting things to say. So let's see everybody's got something interesting to say. But Martin, what have you been up to?
I haven't. I've got very dull stuff to say. I'm going to say it in a very monotone voice. No, I'm only kidding. So what have I been up to? I've rediscovered my love of D-Star pictures. I connected my radio up the other day, and if you follow the instructions in the manual, it doesn't work. But if you wind the bit rate down, the baud rate down to 9600, it works fine. And I've been sending pictures on D-Star recently on, I want to say 51B. I might be wrong. I can't remember. It's in the radio. The radio's in the house. But I've really enjoyed that. Obviously been playing with the talk group. And I had to reprogram a couple of radios recently. So I had to get the old laptop out because it's an old Motorola radio. So and remember my Windows Vista password, because I am quite a heavy user of the 146 meg NOV. Those outside the UK, they think, that's normal. Our 2 meter band stops at the top of 145, but they've allowed us to have this extra megahertz of bandwidth in the 146 meg region for a while. But you have to request an NOV to do it, but you only get it for a year, and it might be withdrawn. And I'm not sure whether I have beef with the RSGB or whether I have beef with Ofcom, who are potentially dragging their heels, presumably trying to still kill commercial radio. I don't know. But if you go to request the 146 meg NOV, a request has been submitted to Ofcom to extend this temporary allocation for another year, and we're awaiting a response. Now, are the RSGB dragging their heels on this? Have they not put the request in earlier? Or are Ofcom dragging their heels? In which case, someone needs to sort this out, because, either way, I had to move my equipment to another frequency, which was just annoying. And, 146, you get left alone, whereas elsewhere on the band, you don't. The other thing I've been working on as well, and I'm not picking on the RSGB, it might be Ofcom, but someone needs to sort it out. Also, been doing a bit of research on something. Years ago, I heard this sound, and it was just a really weird sound, and it was on long wave, which is like 140 something kilohertz. And I heard it when I was probably in the mid 90s, and it was my mum's car stereo. And it wasn't noise. It wasn't just a noise. There was structure to it. It was something that was broadcasting. And you could hear it, for years and years and years. You could hear it all over, the south of England. And for a long time, I never knew what it was, because at the time you couldn't Google it. And I've Googled it since and couldn't find it. And the other day, when researching something, I found out what it was. And my mind it's not quite as exciting as the enigma that is like number stations and things like that. But I was so excited to find out what this was and what that funny noise was. But all will be revealed in a future episode of this show. Otherwise, that is pretty much all I've been working on.
So you've just done the radio DJ thing of keeping everybody in suspense, Martin. So I'll hold you to that feature.
It's better than keeping you in suspenders, because seriously, nobody wants to see that, mate. Not again.
No. You promised you wouldn't tell anybody about that either.
Just on that note, Martin, I need to duck out now.
Okay. Well, listen, thanks for joining us, Martin. And we'll say 73 to you now.
73.
73, Martin.
So Frank, what have you been up to?
Well, I've been a bit busy, primarily writing, Martin. I alluded to this in our discussion, with the WIA thing down in Australia. I completed the analysis and report for the Radio Amateurs of Canada and their RAC 2022 national survey. This one was on call sign policy. And completed that report. It took me about 3 weeks of a pretty consistent effort, but they had a little bit of a priority on getting that. So their executive team, their president, Phil McBride, whom we interviewed here on the podcast when he was elected, and their directors, they now have it for their reading of the draft, and they'll release it, as well as the underlying survey data on the RAC website in the future. Now, they're going to release the data. There's no PR spin, well, we got to keep this secret. We don't want anybody to know it but us. I probably wouldn't work with them if they had that orientation. So I could not be more delighted to volunteer my time for a national organization who just wants to know the answer. And I've tried to help them get the best answer that their data will allow. I'll get back on the 2021 RAC national survey that I had mentioned in previous podcasts. It's about amateur operator activities and behavior. I think there's going to be some surprises come out of that. I've been writing on that. Finalizing my paper on transmit noise. I had put that on hiatus until Rob Sherwood, NC0B, finished his transmit noise measurement for the new Yaesu FTDX10 and the more recent FT710 transceivers. So they would be part of that research. And I'll include the data on my Sherwood tools page at foxmikehotel.com in the near future. And I guess writers just never sleep, Martin. In the middle of all this, when I finished the RAC 2022 survey report, I took about a week and wrote another paper on my horizontal HF loop antenna. And when we built this house about 11 years ago, I had the electricians run a number 14 gauge wire around the edge of my roof shingles, and it comes into the attic. And I did what all the books and articles tell you to do. I get a current balun on the bare wires, feed it with 450 ohm ladder line, goes up to a 4-to-1 balun then to coax at my antenna switch. And it worked okay. My first contact was in California with Steve, WB2 WIK, on 40 meters. Happy. But we had a compressor in the air conditioner we had to replace, and that ladder line runs close to that. And every time that new compressor would kick on, I got all kinds of RFI. So that was not very reliable to get in a QSO with that antenna, and then you can't hear the person on the other end. So I went back to first principles and surveyed the literature again, going back to the 50s, where people like Roger King on the theory of the square loop, and P.A. Kennedy in 1956 and IRE loop antenna measurements, and just kind of educate myself on how loops work and that sort of thing, measured at the bare wire using a Rig Expert Stick Pro, and began with that to figure out what's the best balun wind to match the impedance at the feed point. So I put together a paper on doing that, and even though I didn't have to climb a ladder to get to mine, I have a walk-in attic. If somebody's raising a wire loop, they will have a heck of a time because you can't get the wire loop up in the air with your antenna analyzer unless you get on a ladder. If you do it on the ground, then it's not going to measure out right because it's not above the ground as it's going to be. And our listeners who are astute with antenna building much more than I know all that, but many don't, and they just read the handbooks and go about it in the traditional way. So I try to point out how measurement is always better than just going with tradition, even if tradition is what you wind up using. So had a little foray into that and have a draft paper of that, and I'll send it out somewhere and release it. I will end with this. I had a great visit with the people over at the Ham Radio Network over in the United Kingdom a week or so ago. They asked me to talk about Cycle 25 and the scientific revolution we may be facing with the Scott McIntosh team's theory and how the sunspot cycle is going. Andy was a great host there. I want to give a shout out to him. And the video of that talk is on their YouTube channel. That's linked to my foxmikehotel.com main page. So get on the ICQ Podcast Digital Talk Group occasionally. Martin, I've chatted with you and some others a bit, trying to flesh out my hotspots and finalize the program on my Anytone HT and just doing the normal things that hams do. I think I've stayed out of trouble once again, Martin. Back to you.
It sounds like you have, Frank. And yeah, you do more than just talk to me on the talk group. Last time I caught you, you were setting somebody else's hotspot up for them and checking it was working. So that was good as well. But yeah, good one, Frank. And sounds like very, very interesting things you've been up to. Well, I've not been doing a tremendous amount that's fully radio. We did announce last weekend that we'd added M17 to the ICQ Podcast Digital Project. We've now got 6 modes, which is D-Star, DMR, Yaesu Fusion, NXDN, P25, and M17. So along with Droid Star, you can get in even if you've only got a mobile phone. So that's up and working. I had quite a few computer faults at the weekend. It just seemed that the hardware, all about the same age, decided to all start playing up at the same time. So I'm kind of been working on that last weekend, which was a bit of a shame. I didn't get on the radio as much as I would like to have done. The other thing is, when this podcast gets released, I will be at a rally in South London in a place called Causden for the Cats Bazaar, the Causden Amateur Transmitting Society's Bazaar. And I'll be there as ICQ with a table. We'll demonstrate the talk group. We'll have a few things going and talk to listeners as they come round the show. Did mention it last show, but as I say, the Causden Amateur Transmitting Society is effectively our sister club. We all get on very well with them, and we've been asked to help them this year because they're a bit short on the ground of people. So that's happening. I'm messing around with hotspots as well, Frank. Yeah, I'm still playing with my duplex hotspot, so that works quite well. You talked about, Martin talked about sending pictures on D-Star. Well, I had a go at that a few months back with Phil in Western Australia. He was convincing me to send pictures through D-Star across the ICQ digital project, and he sent me a couple of pictures, so that was a bit of fun. We did try that out. And like Martin Rothwell, I did have 146 megahertz NOV, just to give us a separation between signals on the duplex hotspot. You know, you got to transmit and receive frequency. You got to try and separate them by a little bit, and that extra NOV of extra megahertz is really for digital experimenting. So the hotspot, in my opinion, fitted in. But like Maya said, they've not reallocated it, so that hotspot's off at the moment. So that's what I've been up to. Not a tremendous amount, but all in all, been playing radio. Right, all that's left for me to do is thank the very depleted team that are with me tonight. I'd like to thank Mr. Leslie Butterfield for joining me.
Oh, it's been a blast, Martin. Thanks for inviting me on and I hope everything turns out okay.
Yeah, no problems. Thanks for joining. I'd like to thank Mr. Frank Howell, K4FMH.
Thank you, Martin. I always enjoy it.
Yeah. And Mr. Martin Rothwell, who was with us earlier, we had a vote, Martin, and decided you're buying the beer next session. So, and that was unanimous. Thanks, Martin. And unfortunately, Chris was driving down from up north in the UK tonight, so he couldn't make it, Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH. And also, Bill Barnes got hijacked by his work. Mr. Bill Barnes, WC3B, got hijacked. So only a few of us, but I'm sure you thoroughly enjoyed it as we did, hopefully. So 73 all, and we'll catch you again soon.
Cheerio.
73.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert-free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
And now it's time to have a look at news in brief from me, Colin M6BOY. We start off with news here for all you keen construction people out there, where basically the RSGB's construction competition is welcoming entries across 4 categories: beginning, construction excellence, innovation and software. They're also giving special recognition to all entrants under the age of 25 or those who've just gained their foundation license. There are cash prizes for each section, with the bonus of the overall winner will be declared the winner of the Pat Hawker G3VA trophy as well. Deadlines for entries are the 1st of March, so you've got plenty of time to work on those wonderful ideas that you have. And as I say, you can visit the link on the ICQ podcast website to get you across the RSGB page where you can, submit your entry for the upcoming construction competition. the virtual Hamfest. QSO today are taking their recent presentations made back in August, and they're going to upload them to their YouTube channel. They're uploading a total of 367 presentations every day, sort of some of them every day, to let you give a great opportunity to, as I say, watch the presentations that were done at, say, the previous Expo. Again, we'll pop a link to this on our webpage, but if you check out QSO Today Virtual Ham Expo on YouTube, you'll find the channel and, say, be able to view the content from there. We finish up with news. The RSGB's Exam Standards Committee have published its annual report covering operation of amateur radio exams for the calendar year of 2021. This report now is freely available, and as always, there's a link on the ICQ podcast webpage for you to check out what was happening there. Right, well, now we're going to head over to our features episode, where I chat with UK Hamfests Ian Shepherd, where we discuss the putting back on of the UK Hamfest and say the lessons learnt and the trials and tribulations of running such an event. And say we did this interview hoping, in fact, it might give others say the answers to the question they might be asking about bringing their Hamfest back online as we continue to come out of the pandemic and get back to some sense of normality. So hope you enjoy, hope you get something from the interview, and as always, we hope you enjoy. Thanks a lot.
And now, what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast.
So I'm here with Ian Shepherd, G4 Echo Victor Kilo. Ian would be known, obviously, to a lot of people from his work over the years with the RSGB, etc., but now is solely, among other, I suppose, jobs in his local area, on the organising team for the UK Hamfest. And so it's great to catch up with Ian at the end of the show, because really wanting to have a chat to him about obviously the challenges and what he went through, etc., with his team to put on the Hamfest. That's lessons we can all learn from what the organisation team have done here this weekend, and as I say, things that you might be thinking about for your Hamfest, etc., or your club's get-togethers, etc., in the future, and how to challenge some of the pitfalls. So, I mean, Ian, we're here in sunshine. It all looks positive, smiley face, etc. And I think, generally speaking, we've had a pretty good 2 days.
We have indeed, yeah. Thanks, Colin. It's been a hard couple of weeks, and the organisation for this is virtually a continuous process. You'll probably gather there are many things that have to come together. First of all, there's the venue itself. A Lincolnshire showground, like many other showgrounds, have had a hard time for several years. And they've been trying to squeeze in the events that want to use their services in a very narrow availability. And we found that our slot that we would normally have at the end of September had been booked by a very large event, and it was no longer available. That's a matter which we took up, but, we are a small beer for other things. So we found ourselves 3 weeks later than what we would have liked. However, having said that, we booked it, and we negotiated a favourable price that we could afford. And just a few comments on the fact that how we organise this in terms of the finances, how we can continue year to year. And it's based on a cooperative basis. It's a limited company, but it's a cooperative. So the company, if you like, is owned by the clubs of Lincolnshire, Leicestershire and Nottinghamshire, or some of them. And they come together to put this event on. Their deal is they supply all the labour. The 5 directors who manage to coalesce that and project manage it are, again, just club members. And the basis on how we try to organise it is the trade pay for the hire of the hall, roughly speaking. It is very roughly speaking. And the gate funds the clubs that provide all the other services. And you might say, well, it doesn't cost them anything. Well, believe you me, it does. We run on normally between 40 and 60 volunteers each day. And, this week, we've had one key player, his wife, contracted COVID in the course of this week and was obviously unable to come, as was the prime mover, her husband. Actually, I saw him today because he's now clear, which is very strange, but there you go. They got over it. I think it was a false test. But however, one of the other key players is a guy that sits at the other gate. There's 2 entrances to this, which has been a problem for us for years, that people slide in the other gate that we don't man and manage to find their way into our site, which is barricaded, but they still find their way in, to avoid £6. I'm afraid, listeners, that is the way of the world. If they can get £6 off, that same person would maybe come into the hall here and spend a couple of £1,000 on an amateur radio transceiver and not blink an eyelid. It really is rather strange. However, the other challenges that we've had, everything has increased in price. The insurance we pay, we take full public liability insurance together with insurance for our volunteers from the time they arrive, which is 8 a.m. on the Wednesday, through to what we're doing now, which is clearing up until midnight tonight. Now, the last time we did it in 2019, the cost was a little over £600. The insurance for this year is just under £1,000. That is a big increase, and that has to come from both the gate and the traders. Turning to the traders, they've been excellent. The support we get is legion. It really is brilliant. We've got all of the traders that we would have expected to come. We haven't seen Kenwood because Kenwood distribution is now done by Martin Lynch & Sons, so we wouldn't expect to see them. But one of our main traders, partners, is Icom, the manufacturer. So we have to make sure that Icom, and we keep in touch with them very regularly. One of their biggest events is the Southampton Boat Show, where they sell tens of thousands of pounds worth of marine equipment. So if we organise this event on the same day as Southampton Boat Show, they wouldn't come. So we had to move it for that. And then, of course, it will not escape some amateurs that the RSGB convention was last weekend. So we can't really do that. There is also a contest in the calendar around this time as well. It was really difficult to find a date, but we did find one. The traders came. We didn't have to offer any special deals. We offer a fair deal for everybody. They all pay the same rates. We've never discounted rates for anybody. So whether you're a big trader or a small trader, you pay your same proportion of the cost of hiring the hall. And they respect us for that, because if the big boys control the small guys will probably get fed up and not come. So we got the guy with a couple of tables of components, we've got Icom, we've got Martin Lynch & Sons and Lambs, the big suppliers. Some of the other suppliers, we're sad to see that they don't support events anymore, like Wilson Stanton and Nevada. That's not their business model, so that's changed. One of the other main suppliers, Moonraker, you will have heard of their problems with their sales manager being taken poorly, but they've decided their business model is somewhat different and came to offer an exemplary service for delivery of stock, but didn't bring the stock with them. Now, whether that's an attractive way of doing business, time will tell.
In relation to the traders, were there any concerns that they expressed on the lead up to the show that your team had to resolve for them and help them to overcome those challenges to help them exhibit?
Not insurmountable ones, no, because most of them have done it before. They come, they set up, take Martin Lynch & Sons, they've been coming here ever since we started. And it's a bit earlier today for them to pack up, but we are partners. And as long as it's not a health hazard or whatever, fine. Martin, I think, brought 2 vans. Lee from Lamco, I think he brought 2 vans as well. I've never seen so much coming in. And looking at it going out, I think there's been a lot of trade done, which is great. There were issues, the COVID issue, were they going to be able to have staff? And even a month ago, when the line started to go up for the number of infections, they have to manage, obviously, their staff expectations that I don't want to force my staff to have to go somewhere where they think they're in personal risk. So, understandably, it was dodgy until very recently, just before the event. And that affected the RSGB as well, who are our primary partner. The arrangement, we're quite open about the arrangement between the RSGB and Hamfest. No financial arrangement whatsoever. It's all a gentleman's agreement. So they provide the access to all the committees, not all of them, but many of the committees, from propagation to QSLing to insurance to this or that or the other. And they come in force. 60 or 70 volunteers come and man the information desk for all the various activities of the RSGB. And they pay nothing for that. Our upside of that is that they advertise this event in Icom, and we don't pay anything for that. So it's quid pro quo. They are partners. We are not, each of us, but no money changes hands between the RSGB and the National Hamfest. As many of you will know, that the National Hamfest is a limited company, limited by guarantee. It's non-profit making. There are no shares on issue, but the shareholders are in fact the clubs of Lincolnshire, Leicestershire and Nottinghamshire. And that way we operate like a farmer cooperative. So, for example, I can't quote the figures because I don't know them, but it's something like 40% of the monies in the bank are owned by Lincoln Shortwave Club, about the same for Waddington Club, 25% for... No, it can't be that, can it? Well, 15% for Sporting. It adds up. All the clubs added together comes to 100%. So, should this event not happen, any monies in the bank will be accrued, well, they are accrued every year to those clubs in those proportions. So that way, quite legal, well, actually it's more than legal, that there is no corporation tax to pay. There would be if we ran it any other way.
Now, I certainly know from the full boots that ICQ podcast presenters are driving away from the Hamfest that there's been lots of stuff being brought, and you say lots of brown boxes leaving the room as well. So there's every reason for traders to be very, very positive from there. In terms of visitor numbers, it feels very strong. Everyone's got smiley faces on. I mean, early indications, would you concur that it was a good turnout from attendees?
I certainly would. I was very surprised yesterday morning at around 8 o'clock in the morning. There was a queue. I have seen longer queues in 2018, I think, which was the peak year. But this year, because of COVID, changes in business practices, we offered contactless payment at the gate. We'd never done it before. Several of us were scratching our heads thinking, that will never work because it's very quick. But we hired some terminals. We didn't invest in them just to make sure, just in case we caught a cold. Worked very well. We had a few complaints, which was taking too long. But it saved handling cash. The amount of cash that I've stored away is a minute fraction of what it would normally be. So when I get home tomorrow and put it on my dining room table, and my wife and I will jointly count it, and then it'll be checked by somebody else, I won't have to go with a very secretive-looking bag to NatWest Bank and bank it, because there's not that much. Because it's all gone direct to the bank, which will be great.
So that's obviously a big change, and I know some of the dealers I spoke to over the last couple of days have said the same thing. That they're surprised not only by contactless payment, but the value of some of those contactless payments. So that's obviously one change from 3 years ago now that we're seeing post-pandemic is the way that people are interacting, obviously, in terms of their payments, etc. Are there any other things that you've noticed at all in terms of changes over the last since the last show in 2019 in the attendees or the dealers that other people can look at as well?
Yes, the main thing I think is that there's much more interest in second-hand gear here. Huge interest. The bring and buy, I guarantee, I've talked to Bob Pickles and G3 VCA in a bit, but my own payout for Get iTalk was a lot of money, all sold by one small item, and many others experienced the same thing, because something which you've had in cupboards for 2 or 3 years, and I don't think it's the money, the price of electricity going up is obviously a factor, but it's not that. It's actually that this gear is still useful, and you don't need to keep buying new gear all the time. And I'm sure they've done very well.
And the other thing I was going to ask you was in terms of promoting the event out, to get attendance, etc. Was there any new avenues you guys looked at in terms of promoting? Obviously, the show was on and it was going to be safe and secure, etc. People to attend, or was it really just relying on the traditional promotional partners that you would normally use?
It was largely as before. We do have a social media presence, which one of the directors looks after. We made a few changes. Late in the day, we realised we had a eureka moment. It was Jota weekend. Oh, goodness, we forgot that one. We got rid of, we avoided the Southampton Boat Show. We avoided the RSGB convention, but hit Jota. Sorry, not Jota. So we said that through CamHams, I've got a couple of Scout members. So we said, would it be a problem for you if any Scouts came along to have a play? Absolutely not. So we put the message out, which doesn't appear to have been heard anywhere, that any Scout coming with a uniform would come in free. But I didn't see any. I'm not sure there were any or not, but I don't see any.
I can report one or two. Certainly one that was taller than me, so I'll give you that.
There you go. Well, even if one came, that is a success. Because we wanted to show that we were not trying to eclipse them, that they're welcome here. And I'm sure the guys at CamHams would have let them operate and make a few contacts.
Now, I am going to ask you to make one promise. We're going to do it again next year?
We will do it again next year, subject to the feedback we get from the trade. And several of them mentioned things like, well, we have some doubts that are still around. Is the business model changed too far the other way and it's online or whatever? We will take soundings from all of our partners, our colleagues. We're not us and them. Without them, we're nothing. And without us, there's a major sales opportunity. We all recognise that. So we keep in touch with them. And if they say, it's really not for me, then we won't run it. But we have made a booking at the East of England showground near Peterborough, just off the A1. It's about 40-something miles south of here, because this site is not available to us for any of the weeks that we have to operate in. Now, that causes us a big problem in that our volunteer base, the 5 clubs or 4 clubs that I've mentioned, none of them are based anywhere near Peterborough. So we're looking at options for us to get our same volunteers or, members of those clubs from here to Peterborough and back again. Which might be coaches, it might be free camping, it might be whatever. We haven't looked into those options yet. But to say, it won't be possible is, no, that's defeatist. We will be able to do it. The time has come for me to try and move on, but I said that before. So we're seeking new people to come and help on the organising. It's not a committee, it's a board of directors, which might sound a bit grandiose, but that's the way it is. At the moment, there are 5 directors. One of them wants to retire, so we respect that. So we've got at least one vacancy to replace the numbers, but there's no limit on how many directors we can have. I'd like to have 7, because it's a good number to manage a business. So if anybody out there listens to this and thinks, I could do that, I'm pretty good at this or that or the other, they can contact me, G4EVK. I'm on email, whatever. And if you draw a blank on all of those, try the RSGB HQ, they'll tell you where I live.
He's a no man. I think that's fantastic news to wrap up with the fact that we're going to do everything we can to make sure this event continues next year. And I think that's really, the biggest thing that you sum up from that as well is that if as a group, and I mean as in trader, organizer, attendee, we all work together to make it a great event, then there's no reason these events can't continue. And at the end of the day, I remember people telling me about how much they wanted to have, club meetings on Zoom, and now this week I'm telling them actually those club meetings on Zoom aren't so good. Actually, they weren't what they thought they were going to be. So, on person, in events, together, etc., is so vitally important. And to say, guys, it's been a great 2 days at the National Hamfest in the UK. I'm really pleased I came. I know my team are really pleased we came. We're really appreciating for you and your team for arranging this and for keeping us going. So I say thank you greatly for you and your team to put this on for us, and we wish you a wonderful, successful, final tally up for this year, and hopefully happy planning for next year.
Well, thank you very much, Colin, and especially I'd like to pay tribute to my colleagues, especially Chris Danby and to Graham Boer, who are unfortunately, one of our directors is poorly and is under chemo treatment, so wasn't able to be here, but did all the background work from home. Pam, and also to Roger, who's been looking after the pennies for us, but again has some mobility problems at the moment. So the 5 of us, but only 3 of us are really mobile at the moment. But thanks to them, we've been able to put on the show.
Thanks, Ian, and onwards to next year.
Yeah, onwards and upwards.
Whether it's across the pond or over the channel, the ICQ podcast is international.
Herzlich willkommen in Deutschland.
Good evening.
73 de España.
By amateurs, for amateurs.
Well, everybody, I really hope you enjoyed our final interview gathered from the UK Hamfests, where Ian Shepherd very kindly gave us his views and opinions, etc., about the the tasks and the challenges they had on getting the UK Hamfest back up and running, and obviously our feedback on how that show went. The reason for doing that interview more than anything else was to, I suppose, give other groups and clubs, etc., the confidence and the the pitfalls and challenges to think of as you look to get your events going again. And I think, Dad, you would echo, and I know the team would echo, that it was fantastic to be out and about again, and with the group, not just with listeners but other fellow people in the hobby, the traders, the dealers, the builders, the special interest groups, etc., across the board. It was a fantastic opportunity for us all to be together, and it was pretty much like old times, wasn't it?
Yeah, it certainly was, Colin. And Ian Shepherd's a great guy. We've spent a fair bit of time with him over the years, and he's been put with us a few times to keep us under control. And he always says that with a big smile on his face, thinking there's no hope because I'm going to enjoy myself like you guys do. So, yeah, in fairness, Ian's a great guy, does a great job for the National Hamfest, and be pleased to see him again in the near future.
Certainly will. Now, a follow-up piece of feedback from the last episode, and we were talking about Simon Jordan, Mike Zero, Tango Romeo Zulu, and he was asking about listening to the ICQ podcast on the Amazon speaker system, which I say the correct way is not to mention it, just in case you trigger off all sorts of things in the background. So he just wanted to give us a follow-up on his inquiry, and said that the advice we gave him has worked and seems to work really well. And as I say, he was really chuffed as well to be mentioned on the podcast, and he's going to not only brag to all his friends that he was mentioned on the show, but to do his job best to spread the word about the ICQ podcast. So Simon, I say we really do appreciate you in helping us spread the word of what we do, etc. And anybody who missed that bit of feedback in the last episode, this is where you need to, I suppose, train your Alexa smart speaker to find the ICQ podcast by saying the word podcast, play the podcast ICQ podcast, and it will go and find the podcast for you, rather than just say play the podcast. So it's just the way that the programming works, and obviously our naming conventions, etc. So those two things from there. Now, the other thing as well is that we announced on our newsletter last weekend, this is a good reason why you should sign up for the ICQ podcast newsletter, that we have a new mode on the digital group. So, Dad, I'll let you do the announcement of the new mode that we were able to switch on to the group to increase the amount of ways you can connect into the talk group.
Yeah, we certainly did, Colin. Well, last weekend we added M17 into the mix. So, there's now 6 digital modes you could actually connect to the ICQ digital project, digital voice project, and all are welcome. And we added M17. I think that will be more important as years go on. I don't think it's a tremendous amount there, but who knows? I'm willing to listen to people from M17 as well. The other thing I will tell you, though, is, and there's a gentleman in the States, and I'm going to embarrass you with your call sign, I couldn't get to you. If you've got a QRZ page, it would help if you had an email address, because I would have contacted you. But you've been trying to connect to our digital voice group, and we only use Module A on the XLX server. Now, I could have had multiple modules. I chose only to use Module A because I wanted people to talk to each other, not to hide on different modules. This gentleman has been trying to connect to Module C, and nobody else is there. You are talking to yourself, sir, if you hear this. So, in the past, I just hid them. I believe now I've disconnected the modules. So only Module A works. But as I say, we're pleased to listen to you when you get through. Apart from that, digital talk group seems to be working extremely well. So, there's various people on at various times of the day. I saw somebody from China connect the other day. So there's various people on there, Colin.
Well, that's fantastic, and to say another mode there to get people interested in the group and to communicate as well there, and hopefully our friend will make the required changes there to as I get involved. So certainly look forward to hearing more from everybody from that group there. Okay, well, as always, we'd like to thank our monthly subscription donors who help us pay our way and keep us there going on internet. Just remember, guys, we are starting to move now into the season of goodwill and giving, and please don't forget your ICQ podcast in that process. As I say, everything you can send our way helps us pay our bills, and as I say, value is something that only you can decide. So, if it's a value of a couple of dollars or pounds for a cup of coffee, and you find that value that's as valuable to us as someone who sends us a larger donation. So, as I say, if you find value in what we do, as I say, choose one of our options at icqpodcast.com/donate. As I say, send it our way, and as I say, help us keep doing the job that we're doing here for you, that we obviously enjoy doing. We'd like to thank Martin, Mike 0, Sierra Golf Lima, Frank, Kilo 4, Foxtrot, Mike Hotel, and Leslie, Golf 0, Charlie, India, Bravo for taking part in the News Roundtable. And of course, thanks to Ian Shepherd, Golf 4, Echo, Victor, Kilo for joining me for this episode's feature. All right, Dad, I think that just about rounds up everything as always for ourselves. But time to send you off to the kitchen to make Mrs. B a cup of tea. And who knows, with all that wonderful Christmas goodies starting to make their way into the local shops, maybe you might have a treat or two to find her to start generating some early Christmas cheer in London.
Yeah, certainly will, Colin. Well, in fairness, I'm going to make your mum a cup of tea. I've noticed some chocolate chip cookies in the kitchen, so your mum might get one of those fairly soon. Okay, I'll say 73 to everybody, and we'll catch up with you soon, won't we, Colin?
We sure will, guys. 73 all. Have a great fortnight.